cannot lift even small log of wood. So I raised my hand and I asked teacher, well, we just learned in the math class that if I'm 0, so if I multiply the 0 by a million, I'm still a 0. So she went outside the classroom, and I didn't know it was, it wasn't funny to me, but she looked around and came back, and this was the end of it. So I'm not supposed to talk about it. And it was, like I said, I was pretty innocent for 11 years old, and I didn't mean anything bad. But the whole system discouraged any independence of questioning. You had to be progressive, so to speak, defined by the master, by the school teacher or the secretary of the Communist Party, which wasn't called Communist, was called Worker Party then. So, and I remember it was like from the communists came to the Eastern Central Europe in 1944-45 after World War II, in which gracious Eastern neighbor liberated from one yoke of the Hitler's paradise to the other yoke of the Soviet Union paradise, which was a two totalitarian system, which, because they required total servitude and didn't tolerate any dissent, they were hating each other. They were like the deadliest enemies possible because they were both totalitarian. So they could deal with everybody else, not easily with each other. So in looking at the period after World War II, first, they established control through blood and guts, spilling blood and guts. Everybody, physical. They kill everybody, and they define, everybody who was enemy. They defined whoever they didn't like, enemy of the people. Which was enemy of the people was the person who disagreed with you. So whoever had a propaganda tool in his hand, like if Brian was a minister of propaganda, would define somebody as the enemy of the people. And this was pretty much it. It means, because, it was pretty much death sentence. It was between like 44 and 56, okay? After that, after 56, which is new regime, the same party, just new people got into power, condemned the previous people, and started very interested sequence of events. They said, listen guys, but except, if this is what the speeches I remember in 60s were like 3 hours. It's like, you know, 3 hours on TV, they were speaking about, I don't know how, but 3 hours, and they were blaming the previous people in power, previous communists, that they didn't follow the communist ideas closely enough. It's why we didn't have results. It was like a guy, it doesn't matter his name, Gomulka, but it's something, I don't know if you know about Khrushchev exactly, but it was a Polish version of Khrushchev. So it was like a semi-retarded peasant in the worst. Yes, it was, and with the high self-esteem. I mean, he had a half self-esteem, which is, if you're really stupid, the half self-esteem is very dangerous, because you're sure of yourself, and if you have power to enforce it, then you're dangerous, because you have high, you got high self-esteem. But so I said, guys, you have to give us. They were talking to the nation, you have to give us a second chance. Well, it's like nobody had really a choice, but they were nice. They said, we have to give you a second chance. You have to give us a second chance so we can re-establish and go to the source of the power and justice. Original in the Communist Manifesto by Marx, it's like, so even, they convince a lot of people. They always convince. People are starving for hope. So, especially in the dark, times like then, people wanted to find some reason to live and to look for the future. So they got into power. They started own version of the communist, and it took about, let's say, 12 years till 1968, when finally there's nothing to show for. It's like still no development, it's no progress. So in 1968, in their Communist Party, which was called, like I said, it's Worker Party because it was bad connotation like liberal here now, but then it was communist in Europe. Eastern Europe was with bad name. Not idea, but the word itself. So they decided to blame next somebody else. It was Jews, the old enemies of everybody. If you don't have anybody else, blame the Jews. Never mind that after Holocaust, in about 35 million Polish citizens, it was only 1/10 of the 1% or less, even less than that. It didn't bother them, so they blamed and forced a lot of intellectuals and actual communists, except Jewish descent. They forced to go to Israel, which was, big gain actually for Israel because it was a lot of military, high-ranking military people. And they were very useful in, in the conflict in Israel. So, but this was next, after that, this propaganda, I say by they, I mean, because it was only one line everywhere. It was like National Proletariat Radio everywhere, NPR everywhere. So you didn't have to. Actually, it was very environmentally friendly because you could read one newspaper and you read it all. So actually, it's not as silly as it seems to be. It's very environmentally. Although because of the lack of the basic supply, which was like a toilet paper. The newspapers were used for this purpose because there was no toilet paper, and which is not a joke, because the Ministry of Industry, the tanks were first, guns were second, everything else, military was first, and everything else was second. And toilet paper wasn't on the first 10,000 items, which is really no big deal unless you actually don't have it. Try to do it, just, feel like an Eastern European for a day. Just don't use. And if you saw Seinfeld and they said, can you spare, that's it. And it's, actually it's really tragic when you actually have to live from day to day, in Poland, all means of production except